The village of Oakhaven was not marked on any modern map, and the villagers preferred it that way. Nestled deep within a valley choked by ancient, suffocating pines and cradled by the jagged, unforgiving ridges of the Iron Peaks, the settlement was a place out of time. They lived by a singular, unspoken, and ironclad covenant, passed down through generations like a grim heirloom. Never venture into the whispering woods after the sun dipped below the horizon. When the light faded, the woods belonged to the shadows, and to the things that did not care for the boundaries of the living. But Elias, driven by a grief that hollowed out his chest like a rotted, fungus-ridden log, cared little for the wisdom of the elders or the survival of his soul. His daughter, Clara, lay cold and still in the churchyard, claimed by a fever that had swept through the valley like a scythe, sparing none and taking the brightest light in his world. He had heard the fevered tales of the Wishmaker, a presence, neither man nor spirit, residing in the festering heart of the woods. It was said to grant any desire, to weave reality into the shape of one's deepest longing, provided the price was paid in full. To Elias, the price, whatever it might be, was nothing compared to the silence of his home. Elias entered the woods under the light of a bruised violet moon, his lantern flickering as if afraid to illuminate the path. The trees here were wrong. Their bark seemed to pulse with a slow, arterial rhythm beneath his touch, and their branches reached out like skeletal fingers, grasping at his jacket as if to warn him away or pull him into their embrace. The air grew heavy, smelling of ozone, stagnant water, and ancient wet earth. He walked for hours, or perhaps minutes. Time felt like a river running backward, until the path vanished entirely. He didn't find a cottage, nor a shrine. He found a clearing. In the center stood a figure draped in rags that defied the wind, motionless against a backdrop of shadows that seemed to churn like a whirlpool. It had no face, only a smooth, pale surface where features should have been, reflecting the dying, sickly moonlight.
"I wish for her return,"
Elias whispered, his voice trembling as it pierced the unnatural, heavy silence of the glade.
"I wish for Clara."
The figure didn't speak, but a sound vibrated deep in Elias's marrow, a grinding, discordant hum, like stones crushing glass, or the sound of teeth gnashing in a hollow skull. Then, the silence returned, heavier and more oppressive than before. Elias felt a sudden, sharp coldness in his palm. He looked down to see a small, jagged obsidian coin resting there, pulsing with a faint, oily light. He blinked, and the figure was gone, leaving him alone in the suffocating dark of the forest. He stumbled back to the village, hope, that most dangerous of poisons, seeping into his veins, turning his blood into liquid fire. He reached the churchyard just as the first weak hint of gray light touched the sky. The dew on the grass felt like tears, and the wind whispered warnings he was too desperate to hear. He approached the freshly turned earth of Clara's grave, his hands shaking violently as he pressed the obsidian coin into the damp soil. The ground shuddered. It wasn't a slow disturbance. It was violent, tectonic, as if the earth itself were rejecting what lay beneath. Dirt erupted as if thrown by a frantic, invisible shovel. Elias scrambled back, his breath hitching his throat, watching with wide, wet, terrified eyes. A small hand, gray, cold, and caked with grave soil, broke the surface, then another.
"Clara."
He choked out, stepping forward, his heart soaring despite the dread clawing at his belly. The head emerged. Her hair was matted with earth, and her skin held the waxen, translucent quality of a candle left in the sun, devoid of the rosy warmth of life. But her eyes, those eyes were open. They were not the vibrant, curious blue he remembered. They were infinite voids, dark and flat as the obsidian coin. She climbed out of the pit, her movements jerky, unnatural, like a marionette operated by a cruel and clumsy novice. Her bones made wet, snapping sounds as she stood, adjusting to the sudden gravity of the world above. She looked at Elias, and for a fleeting, delusional moment, he felt a flicker of relief. Then she opened her mouth. It didn't open like a human mouth. It tore. The skin at the corners of her lips split, stretching wide, revealing rows of needle-thin, translucent teeth that shimmered like wet ice.
Papa?
She croaked. The voice wasn't hers. It sounded like dry, dead leaves skittering over a tombstone, layered in the wet, guttural rattle of a dying animal.
Clara, it's me.
Elias said, though he was already backing away, his boots scraping against the gravel as his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped, frantic bird. She lunged. It wasn't the clumsy movement of a child. It was the predatory, instantaneous strike of a viper. She crossed the distance between them in a heartbeat, her small, icy fingers sinking into his throat with the strength of a heavy iron vise. She threw him backward against the jagged iron gate of the graveyard, the metal groaning under impact. Elias gasped, his hands clawing at her wrists. Her skin felt like frozen, immovable stone. He looked into those empty, void-like eyes and saw not his daughter, but a terrifying reflection of the whispering woods, a swirling, bottomless, ancient hunger that had waited eons to feast. The debt, the thing that wore his daughter's skin, whispered, his jaw hanging at an unnatural, unhinged angle, leaking a thick, black saliva.
The Wishmaker takes the vessel, but consumes the life within. A soul for a shell.
Elias realized then, with a jolt of pure, crystalline horror, that the coin hadn't been a payment, had been an invitation, a doorway he had opened from the wrong side. He tried to scream, but the creature leaned in, its breath smelling of stagnant water and ancient decay. It didn't bite him. It pressed its forehead against his, and he felt his own warmth, his memories, his very essence being pulled away, drained through their contact like water spiraling down a dark hole. He felt his vision dimming, his thoughts fraying at the edges like old parchment. As his consciousness flickered, he saw the creature's face begin to shift. The pale, smooth surface of the Wishmaker began to reform over his daughter's features, slowly erasing her and becoming him. He lay on the cold ground, his body growing numb, his heart slowing its frantic pace to a crawl. The thing that looked exactly like him stood up, dusted off his coat, and adjusted his collar with a familiar, precise gesture. It looked down at the dying man with his own eyes, a mask of cold, terrifying indifference sliding into place. It turned toward the village, whistling a soft, haunting tune, the same lullaby Elias had sung to Clara every night, now twisted into a discordant, minor key mockery. The thing walked into Oakhaven, leaving the husk of Elias in the dirt, a silent, forgotten monument to the terrible price of a wish. The woods behind the graveyard sighed, the branches settling, satisfied for another generation, waiting for the next heart hollowed by grief to wander into the dark.
Here